Hello, sleepy soul. Before we start, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who listens to late night stories with the lights off. And tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I always like knowing who is awake on the other side of the screen. I never planned on going back to Newport, Oregon. When I left after graduation, I told everyone I was finished with gray skies, wet sidewalks, salt in the air, and the kind of small-town gossip that stuck to your clothes like smoke. I wanted a city where nobody knew my last name. I wanted an apartment with windows that didn't face the harbor. I wanted mornings that didn't smell like rain and diesel. But money has a way of rewriting promises. My rent in Portland climbed faster than my paycheck. My student loans kept landing in my inbox like threats. And my mother kept calling with that careful voice she used when she needed help but didn't want to ask directly. By the end of December, I was back on the coast, sleeping in my old room and telling myself it was temporary. The Seabird Fuel and Grocery sat on the edge of the docks, a squat little building with peeling blue paint and a neon open 24 hours sign that buzzed in the window. It sold coffee, bait, canned soup, windshield fluid, phone chargers, and whatever else tired fishermen or night drivers forgot until the last second. I had agreed to cover the overnight shift 2 nights after Christmas because the regular cashier wanted to visit his kids in Salem. One shift, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Easy money, I told myself. My mother called just before I clocked in. "Don't let the storm get in your head, Noah," she said. "I'll be fine," I told her. "It's a store, not a haunted lighthouse." She didn't laugh. She never laughed much when storms were mentioned. Neither of us did. When I was 11, my father disappeared during a coastal storm. Not at sea. Not dramatically. He'd gone out to move his truck away from a leaning pine behind our old house, and 15 minutes later the tree came down. The truck was found ruined under the branches. He wasn't in it. Search teams looked for days. They found his jacket near a drainage ditch, soaked through and torn at the sleeve, but nothing else. After that, storms became something more than weather in our house. They became doors that could open and take people. So when the wind started pushing wet fog across the dock road around midnight, I kept myself busy. I restocked paper towels, wiped the counter, rinsed the coffee pots, and listened to the soda coolers hum behind me. Outside, the parking lot lights turned the mist yellow. The fishing boats at the pier rocked against their ropes, knocking softly, like someone tapping from far away. At 12:41 a.m., I saw the man for the first time. He was standing beneath the streetlight across from Pump 3. Tall, shoulders hunched, flannel shirt dark with rain. He wasn't smoking, wasn't looking at a phone, wasn't walking toward the store. He just stood there with his head tilted toward the glass. I waited a minute, then 2. He didn't move. I opened the door just enough for the wind to shove rain against my face. "Sir, you need something?" He didn't answer. The fog shifted, thickened, and when it cleared again, he was gone. I told myself he was drunk. Maybe a deckhand waiting on a ride. Maybe someone sheltering under the light. Newport had plenty of men who looked like they had been left outside too long. Still, the back of my neck stayed tight. 12 minutes later, the door chime rang. He came in as if he had never been outside at all. Wet boots squeaked across the tile. His hair hung flat around his face. He didn't look at me directly. He wandered past the coffee station, past the cheap ponchos, past the rack of beef jerky. His fingers dragged along the shelf edges slowly, like he was reading the store by touch. "Evening," I said, keeping my voice level. He made no reply. I watched him in the curved security mirror above aisle 3. He stopped near the chips, crouched, and gave a laugh so sudden and high that my hand froze around the receipt tape. It sounded childish, but not innocent. It sounded like somebody imitating laughter without understanding why people did it. "Sir," I said, stepping back from the register. "You can't mess with the stock. Are you okay?" He knocked over 2 boxes of corn chips and crouched lower behind the aisle. Another laugh came, softer this time. That was when I saw the flash of metal. It was in his right hand. Small. Silver. Sharp enough for the fluorescent light to catch it. My body moved before my mind did. I backed toward the front door, grabbed my keys from the hook under the counter, and bolted into the rain. I didn't try to be brave. I didn't try to reason with him. I ran straight to my car, locked myself inside, and called 911 with fingers so stiff I nearly dropped the phone. Through the windshield, I could see him moving inside the store. Not walking, darting. His shadow passed between aisles, low and quick, then vanished behind the coolers. The fog pressed against the glass. The neon sign buzzed. My breath fogged the inside of the window. The police arrived 6 minutes later, though it felt like an hour. Red and blue lights spun through the mist. 2 officers went in with flashlights. A third stayed with me and kept asking if I was hurt. They found no one. The side door that led toward the docks was open, banging gently in the wind. There were wet marks on the floor, but the rain had blown in so hard the officers couldn't say which tracks were his and which came from the storm. When they checked the security footage, my stomach went cold. The man had entered the building before I ever saw him under the streetlight. He had slipped in through the side door at 12:19 a.m., almost 20 minutes before he appeared in front of the pumps. The cameras showed him crouching behind aisle 3 while I restocked the coffee cups. He had been there while I turned my back. He had been there while I talked to my mother on speakerphone. He had been watching me move around the store as if he were deciding how close he could get. One officer paused the video when the man's hand came into view. "You did the right thing leaving," he said quietly. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. I went home at dawn and sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes before I could go inside. The sky was dull silver. My mother's porch light was still on. I remember thinking that nothing in the world should look normal after a night like that, but everything did. The neighbor's dog barked. A garbage truck rolled past. Somewhere down the hill, gulls screamed at the harbor. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that wrong little laugh. I saw the man crouched between shelves, silent and waiting, while I moved around completely unaware. The police kept the side door sealed for a week. They questioned dock workers, checked the alleys, asked around at shelters and bars. Nobody admitted seeing a man like that. No one reported missing tools, stolen knives, or a wet stranger wandering the marina. It was like he stepped out of the fog and returned to it. I went back to the store once in daylight to collect my jacket. The morning clerk was there, acting like nothing unusual had happened, humming along with the radio while he priced cans of soup. But aisle 3 looked different to me now. The space behind the snack boxes seemed deeper than it should have. The security mirror caught my reflection and stretched it, making me look pale and half-formed. I stood there for too long. Then I left. Months have passed. I work day shifts now at a print shop inland, where the worst thing that happens is a paper jam. I still drive past Seabird Fuel sometimes if I have to take the dock road. I never stop. Not at night. Not in fog. The open sign still buzzes in the window, and when the rain is heavy, the light blurs until the whole store looks underwater. I don't know who that man was. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he was hiding from someone. Maybe he never meant to hurt me. But I saw what was in his hand, and I saw how long he had waited before showing himself. That is what changed me. Danger does not always kick the door open. Sometimes it is already inside, crouched low, listening to you breathe. Fear is not weakness. Fear is information. And if the quiet voice in your body tells you to leave, don't argue with it. Leave. Story 2. I never liked driving through mountain fog. It doesn't simply cover the road. It edits the world. It erases distance, softens danger, turns headlights into ghosts, and makes every curve feel like a decision you might regret. That October night, the Sierra foothills were wrapped in a fog, so thick the road stripes appeared and vanished under the car like nervous thoughts. My husband, Daniel, drove with both hands locked on the wheel. His jaw was set in that protective way that always made me feel both loved and irritated. We were heading toward a 24-hour gas station on Highway 88, a place we usually stopped on the way back from hiking trips. In daylight, it was ordinary: 3 pumps, a tiny market, a coffee machine that burned everything. At night, surrounded by pines and fog, it looked like the last lit building on Earth. 2 nights before, Daniel and I had argued about my work. I write travel pieces, mostly small assignments, quiet hotels, old roads, places people pass without noticing. I was scheduled to drive alone to Nevada the next week, and he hated the idea. "I trust you," he'd said, which meant he didn't trust the world. "I can't live like every road is a threat," I snapped back. He didn't yell. Daniel almost never yelled. He just looked tired and said, "No, Naomi, but you also can't pretend the world becomes safe because you want it to." That sentence was still sitting between us when my headlights caught something on the shoulder. At first I thought it was a trash bag, a dark shape folded near the ditch. Then it moved. "Daniel," I whispered. "Stop." He slowed. "What is it?" "I think that's a person." The shape became a woman as we rolled closer. Thin, drenched, sitting on the edge of the road with her arms wrapped around herself. Her hair stuck to her face. She looked young, maybe 25, maybe younger, but fear makes people hard to age. Daniel stopped the car, but kept it in drive. "Naomi," he said. "I know." I rolled down the window halfway. Fog slipped in cold against my cheek. "Are you hurt?" I called. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were wide and wet, not just from rain. "I was supposed to meet my mother at the station," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "I can't walk anymore." The gas station lights glowed less than a mile ahead, blurred yellow through the trees. Daniel looked at me. I could see the calculation in his face. Pulling over could be compassionate. Pulling over could also be stupid. Every warning I'd ever read about staged roadside emergencies flickered through my mind. But so did the way her hands shook. So did the raw desperation in her voice. "We can take you to the station," Daniel said finally. "That's it. Straight there." She nodded so quickly it looked painful. "Please." We unlocked the back door and let her in. The car filled with the smell of wet clothes, cold mud, and panic. She clutched the seat belt, but didn't buckle it until I reminded her. Her name, she said, was Mara. She spoke in broken pieces, like the story was too sharp to hold all at once. An ex-husband, threats, a motel outside Jackson where she had been hiding, a phone she had thrown into a creek because she believed he was tracking it. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. I kept mine on the mirror. "Did he hurt you?" I asked carefully. She flinched. "He hurts people when he thinks they belong to him." That was not an answer, but it was enough. The gas station appeared through the fog like a ship at sea. One pickup sat beside Pump 1. The market windows were bright, but the lot around them fell away into darkness. Daniel parked near the entrance and left the engine running. "We'll wait until your mother gets here," I said. Mara leaned forward between the seats, scanning every corner of the lot. Her breathing came shallow and fast. "He always finds me if I stop moving." "No one followed us," Daniel said, though his voice had gone hard. She shook her head. "That's what it feels like right before he appears." For 15 minutes, nothing happened. Fog moved between the pumps. The open sign flickered. Somewhere in the pines, a branch cracked under its own weight and made me jump. A sedan passed without turning in. Then a delivery truck. Then silence again. I tried to talk to Mara, to keep her anchored. I asked where she was from. She said, "Too many places." I asked if her mother knew the station. She said yes, then no, then pressed both hands to her mouth like she was afraid she'd said the wrong thing. Daniel glanced at me. I understood what he was thinking. Her fear was real, but her details shifted. Trauma can do that. So can a lie. The horrible thing is that sometimes both look exactly the same from the outside. At 11:18 p.m., headlights emerged from the fog, slow and low. Mara's whole body stiffened. She leaned close to the window, then released a sound that was almost a sob. "Mom!" A gray SUV pulled in near the air pump. A woman in a heavy cardigan stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. Mara opened the door and ran to her. The older woman caught her with both arms, holding her so tightly I could see the shake in her shoulders from across the lot. I felt relief then, sharp and sudden. Not happiness exactly. More like the release that comes after your body has been bracing for impact. Daniel waited until they were both inside the SUV before he pulled away. Neither of us spoke for a long time. On the drive home, the fog seemed thicker. Every tree line looked occupied. Every pair of headlights in the mirror lasted too long. I kept thinking of Mara's fingers gripping my sleeve as she climbed into the back seat. I kept thinking how fear had made her seem both fragile and dangerous, someone to help and someone to mistrust in the same breath. At home, I opened my journal but couldn't write the article I was supposed to be drafting. Instead, I wrote one sentence. You don't know how close danger is until you see it reflected in someone else's eyes. I slept badly that night. In my dreams, the gas station lights flickered while someone stood beyond the pumps, watching us decide whether to open the door. For weeks afterward, I avoided that route. I started sending Daniel my location before long drives. I kept a personal alarm in my coat pocket. I checked my back seat even when I knew nobody was there. Part of me hated that. I hated feeling smaller. I hated how one night could install locks inside your mind. But another part of me understood something I had ignored for years. Caution and compassion are not enemies. You can help someone without handing your safety over completely. You can listen to fear without letting it make you cruel. Sometimes courage is not dramatic. Sometimes it is a car idling under gas station lights while two people watch the fog and wait to see what comes out of it. I still take assignments. I still drive. But I don't romanticize empty roads anymore. I don't mistake loneliness for safety. And when someone asks for help in the dark, I hear two voices now. One says, be kind. The other says, stay awake. I listen to both. Story 3. I had been working nights at Broward County Fuel for almost 11 months when the man first walked in. The job was nothing to brag about. It paid just enough to keep my lights on and gave me something I didn't realize I needed after my marriage ended: structure. The house had become unbearable after Claire left. Every room still held the shape of our life together. The empty hook where her keys used to hang. The mug she never packed. The dent in the couch cushion where she used to fold her legs under herself and read. I couldn't sit in that silence without feeling like the walls were asking me what I had done wrong. So I worked nights. Broward County Fuel sat along Route 27, 6 miles outside of Morton Ridge. By day, it served farmers, truckers, and people passing between towns. By night, it became a box of light surrounded by fields and black road. I liked the routine. Refill the coffee at 1:45. Check the coolers at 2:30. Sweep the entry mats before dawn. Count the lottery slips twice because the owner accused everyone of being bad at math. The place smelled like burnt coffee, gasoline, old rubber, and floor cleaner. It was not pleasant, but it was predictable. Predictable felt safe. That changed on a Wednesday in early January. At 2:17 a.m., the camera above pump 4 flickered. It had been glitching for weeks, showing bands of static whenever the temperature dropped. I wrote a note to call maintenance, though I knew the owner would ignore it until the screen died completely. Then the door chime rang. A man stepped inside wearing a faded canvas jacket, mud on his boots, and jeans dark around the cuffs from melted snow. He looked about 35, maybe 40, ordinary in the way most dangerous memories begin. His hair was tucked under a gray cap. His face had no expression. I straightened behind the counter. Need help finding anything? He turned slowly. His smile was small and misplaced. No, just moving through. He walked the aisles without touching anything. Past the motor oil, past the chips, past the cooler doors fogged from the heater. His boots made a soft dragging sound on the tile. I watched him in the security mirror, trying to decide if he was drunk, tired, or just strange. After less than a minute, he left. The chime rang. The door swung closed. I looked through the glass. There was no car at any pump. No figure walking across the lot. No footprints leading away, though the thin snow outside was clean enough that there should have been. I told myself he must have parked down the road. Maybe a truck was waiting beyond the light. Maybe I was exhausted and making shapes out of nothing. But my chest stayed tight. 10 minutes later, the chime rang again. This time the same man wore a black hoodie pulled up over his cap and thin gloves on both hands. Same boots, same dragging step, same face. He came straight to the counter and placed a pack of peppermint gum in front of me. Back again? I asked, trying to sound casual. My voice failed me halfway through. He didn't answer. From his jacket pocket, he took out a small handgun and laid it beside the gum as calmly as if he had set down his wallet. The world narrowed to the black shape of it. My hands went cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe right, couldn't decide whether looking at the weapon or looking away would make him more likely to use it. He slid a wrinkled dollar bill across the counter. "Keep the change," he said. His voice was almost gentle. I rang up the gum with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. The register beeped too loudly. I gave him the receipt because some stupid part of me was still following store procedure. He took the gum, slipped the gun back into his pocket, and walked out. The chime rang. This time I locked the door before he was fully across the lot. I called the sheriff's office from behind the counter, crouched low, my voice shaking so badly the dispatcher asked twice if I was injured. A deputy arrived 20 minutes later. He was young, polite, and tired. He checked the aisles, checked outside, then watched the camera feed while I stood beside him feeling like a child waiting to be believed. The footage showed the door opening. It showed static where the man's face should have been. It showed my hands moving at the register, but the counter itself blurred for 9 seconds, the exact window when the gun had been visible. "You said he didn't point it at you?" the deputy asked. "No, but he wanted me to see it." The deputy nodded in the way people nod when they don't know what to do with what you've given them. He left me with a report number and a recommendation to stay alert. Stay alert, as if alertness was a lock, as if fear could be filed under paperwork. I didn't sleep when I got home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way the gun rested beside the gum. Not raised, not rushed, displayed. A message with no explanation. A week passed. Then 2. No suspect. No matching plates. No fingerprints on the gum rack, counter, or door. The owner asked if I was sure I hadn't exaggerated because some people get jumpy on graveyard. I stopped telling people the details, but the station had changed. The chime sounded sharper. The refrigerators hummed like something whispering from the walls. Cars across the road seemed to idle longer than they should. I began locking the doors after midnight and buzzing regulars in one at a time. I bought a bat and kept it behind the counter, though I knew perfectly well a bat would not help much against a gun. Then, one night in late January, I took the trash out behind the station and saw boot prints in the frost. They began near the dumpster, deep and clean, then crossed the gravel toward the tree line. They were not mine. They were not from any co-worker. They stopped at the edge of the dark pines and vanished where the snow should have kept them going. I checked the time, 2:17 a.m. After that, sleep became a negotiation I usually lost. In mid-February, during a windstorm that rattled the front doors in their frame, he came back. I was pouring out old coffee when the chime rang. I had forgotten to lock the door after letting in a trucker 20 minutes earlier. Before I looked up, I heard his voice. "Coffee still bad?" My hands froze around the pot. He stood by the counter, wearing the same canvas jacket from the first night. No hoodie, no gloves, no visible weapon. His face was calm, almost blank. "What do you want?" I asked. He looked up at the security camera, then back at me. "Did they fix those yet?" I couldn't swallow. "You need to leave." "I will." He leaned slightly toward the counter. "But you should understand something. Some people pass through and nobody sees them. Not really. Not even when they're standing close." I grabbed the phone. He smiled then, and this time there was nothing human in it. The chime rang when he left. I ran to the window, but the lot was empty. No car. No footprints. The wind blew snow across the asphalt in silver waves. The sheriff came again. The footage showed static from 2:17 to 2:18. Nothing else. I quit the following week. I didn't give a dramatic explanation. I told the owner the hours were bad for my health, which was true enough. I moved 2 towns over and took day shifts at a hardware store where customers argued about screws and paint colors. Boring, ordinary bright. I learned to appreciate bright. Still, some nights, I wake at exactly 2:17 a.m. with my heart racing. I hear the memory of a door chime. I picture a pack of gum sliding across a counter. I see a small gun laid down with terrible patience. Maybe he was just a man trying to scare a cashier. Maybe he enjoyed watching fear arrive. Maybe he was something stranger, something that never intended to be caught on camera, because it never truly arrived in the way people do. I don't know. What I know is this: evil doesn't always kick, shout, or threaten. Sometimes it enters softly, buys gum, and leaves you to understand the message later. And when your instincts tell you that ordinary has turned dangerous, believe them before anyone else does. Story 4. I was never comfortable driving after Halloween parties. Not because I believed in ghosts or anything like that. It was the roads. Late October roads feel emptier than normal, like every house has pulled its light back behind curtains and left the dark to take care of itself. That night, I left my cousin's place in Fairview, Tennessee, much later than I should have. It was almost 12:30 a.m. I had too much coffee in my system, not enough food, and nearly 3 hours of backroads between me and home. My phone battery was at 9%. The gas gauge set just under a quarter tank. I told myself I would make one quick stop, fill up, grab something salty, then get to the interstate before sleep caught up with me. The fog rolled in as soon as I left the main highway. It came low and thick, curling over the asphalt like smoke from a fire no one could see. My headlights cut tunnels through it, but only for a second at a time. Then everything closed again. That was when the sign appeared. Ash Bend Gas Market. The letters were old and flickering, white light buzzing through the fog. The building behind it looked tired but open. A red neon beer sign glowed in the window. One pump had a green light blinking above it. I slowed, turned in, and parked beside the pump. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee, dust, and wet pavement. A small TV behind the counter hissed with static over what looked like a college football game, though no sound came from it. The man working the counter looked up from a crossword puzzle and nodded. He had a silver mustache, heavy eyelids, and the kind of voice that turned everything into a warning. "Fogs mean tonight," he said. "Yeah," I replied. Came out of nowhere. Road 61 gets strange when it sits low like that. He took my cash and looked past me toward the windows. "Best keep your lights dipped. High beams show you things you don't need." I gave a nervous laugh because I didn't know what else to do. He didn't laugh back. I filled the tank, bought the worst coffee I have ever tasted, and got back in my car. Just as I started the engine, my GPS chimed. Road ahead closed. Take alternate route. The blue line redrew itself, sending me onto a smaller road that cut through woods. I was tired enough not to question it. The attendant had mentioned Road 61 being bad. Maybe there was construction. Maybe a wreck. The detour started smooth, then narrowed. Trees crowded both sides until their branches met above me. The fog thickened, catching the headlights and throwing them back at me. 15 minutes passed before I realized I had not seen another car, house, mailbox, sign, or reflector. Then I saw the first figure. It stood at the edge of the trees on the right side of the road. I thought it was a scarecrow at first. A tall shape in old clothes, head angled toward the car. Then my headlights caught the face. A white clown mask. My foot eased off the gas. Another figure stood 30 feet ahead. Then another on the left shoulder. 10, maybe 12 in total, spaced along the road in uneven intervals. All wearing masks. All facing me. I whispered, "Nope," though there was no one in the car to hear it. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was kids. Halloween nonsense. Drunk locals trying to terrify anyone stupid enough to follow a detour after midnight. But the stillness was wrong. People playing pranks fidget. They laugh. They give themselves away. These figures stood like they had practiced being statues. Then one of them stepped into the road. He held something long against his shoulder. A wooden bat, maybe a branch. It didn't matter. Another figure moved. Then another. My body finally understood what my brain was still debating. I slammed the car into reverse. Gravel and leaves spat under the tires. The masked figures broke from stillness into motion. One ran alongside the passenger side for 3 impossible seconds, close enough that I saw the mask's painted red smile through the fog. Something hit the back window hard enough to make me shout. I reversed faster than I should have, steering by instinct, praying I didn't slide into a ditch. When I found a wider patch of road, I spun the car around and drove back the way I came, engine screaming, fog tearing open and closing behind me. I expected to see the gas station again, or the main road closed, or police lights, anything that made sense. Instead, the road widened, the fog thinned, and suddenly I was back on Highway 61 with my GPS calmly telling me to continue for 19 miles. The detour road behind me did not appear on the map. By the time I reached a real gas station near Maple Ridge, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the door. The night attendant, a kid with messy hair and earbuds hanging around his neck, stared at me. "You okay, man?" I tried to explain. The fog. Ash Bend Gas Market. The old attendant. The detour. The people in masks. At the name Ash Bend, his expression changed. "You sure that's what it was called?" "Yes." He glanced toward the windows. "That place burned down years ago. Electrical fire. There might be a sign left, but there isn't a store." "No," I said. "I bought gas there." He didn't argue. That made it worse. He just looked at me with careful concern and said, "Maybe you stopped somewhere else." I knew I hadn't. When I got home, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen until daylight, replaying every second. By morning, my mind had started trying to protect itself. Exhaustion. Fog. Halloween prank. Maybe I had misread the sign. Maybe the attendant was at some other gas market with a similar name. Then I checked my gas tank. It was still nearly empty. The receipt I was sure I had put in my jacket pocket was gone. That afternoon, under a bright sky that made the whole story feel embarrassing, I drove back. The road looked smaller in daylight, less haunted, more neglected. I found the spot where Ash Bend should have been. There was no building, only a charred concrete pad, weeds growing through cracks, and an old sign leaning at an angle, its letters faded but readable. Ash Bend Gas Market. No pumps, no counter, no TV, no old man with a silver mustache, just ruin. I walked the edge of the property, my shoes crunching broken glass and gravel. A faint burnt smell lingered, or maybe I imagined it because I expected to. Near the back of the lot, tire tracks cut into the mud and disappeared toward a narrow road swallowed by trees. My road. I followed them for 20 yards before the brush became too thick. That was enough. I turned around and got back in my car. A week later, a deputy returned my call. He said local kids had been pulling mask pranks in that area for years. One driver had nearly crashed the previous Halloween when someone jumped out from the woods wearing a clown mask. They had found cheap masks, beer cans, and footprints along the old service roads. "So it was a prank," I said. "Probably," he replied. "But don't go out there alone after midnight." That word stayed with me. Probably. Knowing the masked people were human did not make the fear smaller. It made it worse in some ways. Ghosts are frightening because they shouldn't exist. People are frightening because they do. I still think about the old attendant sometimes. Maybe he was never there. Maybe my tired brain built him out of fog, static, and a burned-out sign. But I remember his voice telling me to keep my lights low because I would see more than I wanted. He was right. Fear can make shadows into monsters, but sometimes the monsters are already there, waiting for fear to slow you down. I don't drive that road anymore. I don't follow late-night detours without checking twice. And I never laugh at the small voice that says, "Turn around." The night does not care whether you believe in it. Story 5. I was 13 this summer. My grandmother decided she wanted to cross the desert one more time before her eyesight got worse. She told my mother it would be a simple drive, just a little trip through the Southwest, nothing dramatic. But even at 13, I could tell she wasn't really talking about scenery. Grandma Ruth had been shrinking that year. Not physically exactly, though she had gotten thinner. It was more like life had started taking pieces from her in quiet ways. First, her driver's license renewal came with extra questions. Then the doctor mentioned cataracts. Then her friends stopped calling because most of them were sick, gone, or too tired to leave their houses. When she said she wanted to see the desert again, what she meant was that she wanted to prove she was still the kind of woman who could get in a car and go. My mother hated the idea of me going with her. She drives too fast when she's upset, Mom said. Grandma heard that from the kitchen and shouted, "I drive exactly fast enough." That settled it. We left Wichita before sunrise on a Monday in her silver Buick. The car smelled like lemon air freshener, old gum, and the lavender sachets she kept in the glove box. The radio played country songs that faded in and out every few miles. I remember watching the land flatten, widen, and turn pale under the sun. By the third day, the chocolate we'd bought in Amarillo had melted into one soft brick. The air conditioner blew mostly warm air, and Grandma still sat straight behind the wheel with her sunglasses low on her nose. "Don't ever let people decide you're finished," she told me somewhere outside Winslow. I didn't say anything. "You don't have to. You're 13. Everything you think is written on your face." That was Grandma. Near sunset, the fuel light blinked on. A sign warned that the next services were 49 miles away. Grandma muttered something under her breath that I was not supposed to repeat, then spotted a faded billboard half hidden by weeds. Cedar Flats Gas and Dine. 1 mile. The place looked like it had been abandoned, then changed its mind. One pump leaned toward the road. The sign buzzed with missing letters, casting orange light over cracked pavement. A metal icebox sat outside the door, empty except for rainwater and dust. Inside, the air was too cold and smelled stale, like a refrigerator that had been cleaned but never used again. Faded postcards lined one wall. Snack cakes sat in plastic racks. A man stood behind the counter wiping the same clean spot over and over with a white rag. Pale face, thinning hair, eyes that moved to us the instant we entered. His name tag read Dale. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "Just need gas and a restroom," Grandma replied, polite but clipped. I stayed near the candy rack while she went down the short hallway. Dale did not stop looking at me. He didn't smile, didn't blink much, just wiped the counter and watched. I pretended to compare licorice prices, though my hands had gone sweaty. When Grandma came out, something in her face had changed. She paid cash. Dale slid the change across the counter, 1 coin at a time. Grandma didn't count it. She took my wrist gently, which somehow scared me more than if she had grabbed me hard. "Let's go, sweetheart." We got in the Buick and left without another word. For 20 minutes, the road stretched straight and empty, desert on both sides turning purple under the lowering sun. I watched Grandma's hands. They were tighter on the wheel than usual. Her wedding ring trembled with each bump in the pavement. Then headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A pickup truck, maybe brown, maybe red. Hard to tell in the fading light. It stayed behind us at a steady distance, not close enough to honk, not far enough to ignore. "Another traveler," I said, trying to sound older than I was. Grandma did not answer. Storm clouds built along the horizon. Lightning flickered far away, turning the mountains white for half a second at a time. Grandma pressed the gas. The truck did too. It didn't pass. "It can go around," Grandma said finally, though she sounded like she was talking to herself. The truck did not go around. For the next hour, it matched us. Every time Grandma slowed, it slowed. Every time she sped up, it stayed with us. Once, on a long open stretch, she eased onto the shoulder and stopped. "If he's just driving," she whispered, "he'll pass." The truck stopped behind us. Grandma's face went hard. "Buckle tight." I barely had time to pull the belt across my lap before she slammed the Buick into drive and took off, tires kicking dust across the road. Behind us, the truck's headlights flashed once, then followed. Night settled completely. The radio lost signal and dissolved into static. There were no houses, no towns, no lit windows. Only our headlights and his. Sometimes the truck disappeared when the road dipped, and I would think it's over. Then the lights would rise again in the mirror, closer than before. Around midnight, Grandma said, "We are not stopping again." I nodded because my voice had stopped working. By 2:30 a.m., the gas gauge was near empty. Grandma's face had gone pale, but her eyes stayed locked forward. The folded map on the dash was useless. We hadn't known where we were for hours. We only knew we had to keep moving. "We'll make Marlow," she whispered. "There'll be police in Marlow." The headlights vanished around 4:10. Grandma did not slow. "Don't look back." Of course I looked. For 1 second before the curve swallowed the road behind us, I saw a dark pickup sitting on the shoulder, motionless. Its lights were off. A figure stood beside it, cap pulled low, facing our direction. Then it was gone. We reached Marlow just after sunrise. The town was barely awake. Grandma drove straight to the police station and stopped so abruptly the tires squealed. An officer stepped outside with a cup of coffee in his hand. "Ma'am, everything all right?" Grandma got out slowly. Her hands were shaking now that she no longer needed them steady. "Someone followed us from Cedar Flats," she said. The officer's expression changed at the name. They searched the highway. They checked nearby roads. They found no truck, no driver, no matching report. When I described Dale at the gas station and the red cap I thought I had seen in the pickup, the officer went quiet. "You sure the place was Cedar Flats?" "Yes," Grandma said. He looked at another officer, then back at us. "That station's been closed for 6 years. Fire took the diner side first, then the rest. Nobody works there." Grandma stared at him. "We were there last night," she said. Nobody corrected her. They just looked sorry. Grandma never drove after that trip. She told people her eyes had finally gotten too bad, and maybe that was partly true. But I knew better. It wasn't her vision that failed. It was the idea that roads were honest things, that signs pointed to real places, that headlights behind you belonged to people with somewhere else to go. I'm grown now. I have a daughter of my own, and sometimes when I drive at night, I see her face in the rearview mirror and remember what it felt like to be small in the passenger seat, watching my grandmother try to outrun something neither of us understood. Maybe it was a man. Maybe it was a town prank. Maybe Cedar Flats had one last night left inside it and somehow opened for us. I don't know. What I know is that fear can be patient. It can follow at a reasonable distance. It can wait for you to run out of gas, courage, or excuses. And sometimes survival is not fighting. Sometimes it is keeping both hands on the wheel and refusing to stop. Story 6. I never thought fear could hit so fast. Not worry, not nerves, real fear. The kind that strikes the ribs first, drops into the stomach, and leaves your mind scrambling for explanations while your body already knows there are none. That March morning, I was driving along Highway 62 toward Larkspur with Jonah Price in the passenger seat. Dawn had just started to stain the horizon orange. The road was empty except for our headlights and the occasional dark shape of a mailbox or fence post sliding out of the mist. Jonah was quiet. He kept coughing into his sleeve and shifting the backpack at his feet. I kept thinking about the black sedan we'd seen parked at the abandoned service station 6 miles back. It had been sitting beside the old pumps with its lights off. A driver had been inside. I couldn't see his face, only the shape of his head turned toward our car as we passed. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Too much coffee, too little sleep. The aftermath of living alone since Dad died and finding menace in every parked vehicle. But now, as we neared Mr. Harlan's house, I wished I had listened to the feeling. My sister Tessa's voice kept replaying in my head. "Caleb, please don't make this dramatic. Call the police if something feels wrong." "I just want to check on him," I'd said. Mr. Harlan owned the auto shop where Jonah and I worked. He was gruff, stubborn, and older than he admitted, but he never missed opening the shop. 2 days without answering calls was not like him. His sister lived out of state. The police had said they would do a welfare check when someone was available. That could mean hours, maybe longer. So we went. The house sat at the end of Alder Hill Road, a narrow lane lined with wet pines and leaning fence posts. It was an old Victorian with peeling green trim and a porch that sagged slightly in the middle. Mr. Harlan loved the place because it had belonged to his father. I hated it because it always looked like it was listening. The front gate creaked in the wind. "Caleb," Jonah said. "I know. We stay together." "I know." My camera hung around my neck. It was a ridiculous comfort. I had carried one since high school, back when photography made me feel like the world could be framed, cropped, and understood. That morning, it felt useless. We walked up the porch steps. The front door was not closed all the way. A brass key hung from the lock. That was the first thing that made the fear real. I knocked. "Mr. Harlan?" No answer. I pushed the door open a few inches. The smell reached us before the sight did. Stale air, spilled coffee, something metallic underneath. Jonah stepped back. No. The kitchen caught the first light of morning through stained glass. A mug lay cracked near the table. A chair had been knocked sideways. Mr. Harlan was on the floor, motionless. The room showed signs of a struggle, and whatever had happened there had happened violently enough that my brain refused to process it all at once. Time slowed in a way I had always thought was dramatic nonsense until it happened to me. I noticed stupid things. A spoon in a mug. A towel hanging from the oven handle. A calendar still turned to February. I remember thinking that ordinary objects should not be allowed to sit so calmly in a room where something terrible had happened. "Call," Jonah whispered. I backed out, pulling him with me. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I called 911 from the porch, then from the yard because I couldn't stand being close to the open door. While we waited, I kept looking toward the road, expecting the black sedan to appear between the trees. The police arrived in waves. First one cruiser, then two more. They pushed us back behind the gate and told us not to leave. Jonah sat on the curb with his head in his hands. I stood beside him, cold and nauseous, my camera pressing against my chest like an accusation. Later, we learned enough to wish we hadn't. Two men from a nearby town had broken into Harlan's house looking for cash and tools they thought he kept hidden. They were known to police. Desperate, reckless, already wanted for other burglaries. What happened inside that kitchen was not random, but it was not meaningful either. That made it worse. Mr. Harlan had not been chosen because of a great secret. He had been chosen because he was alone. I kept returning in my mind to the abandoned service station. The black sedan. The driver watching. The way Jonah had turned to look at it too, then said nothing because neither of us wanted to sound paranoid. Had they been sitting there before the break-in? After? Had they watched us drive toward the house? Had danger been visible for one clear second, and had I simply driven past it? The police said the sedan might have belonged to someone else. It might not matter. They had suspects. They had evidence. They told us not to make connections that were not there. Maybe they were right. But fear doesn't obey evidence the way reports do. After that morning, every gas station on a rural highway looked different to me. Every parked car became a question. Every man standing too still near old pumps became a warning I couldn't ignore. I started driving Highway 62 just to look at the abandoned service station, as if staring at it long enough would reveal what I had missed. The sign had half fallen down. The pumps were rusted. Weeds grew through the concrete. Nothing moved there in daylight. At night, I avoided it completely. Jonah noticed the change. "You don't sleep," he said one afternoon at the shop. I shrugged and kept sorting parts. "Caleb, what do you want me to say?" He didn't answer because there was nothing useful to say. We had seen a man we knew reduced to a police report. We had walked up to a door believing we were doing a favor and found ourselves standing at the edge of something that would not leave us. My sister Tessa tried to help. She made dinner twice. She sent me articles about trauma responses and told me to talk to someone. I listened. Sometimes I even tried. But talking did not remove the image of that black sedan from my mind. It did not erase the key in the lock, the open door, the kitchen light, Jonah's voice saying no before either of us fully understood why. Months later, I drove past the old service station at noon. The sky was clear. The place looked smaller than I remembered, just another dead business beside a dead stretch of road. A new market had opened half a mile away, bright and clean, with security cameras pointed at the pumps. I slowed anyway. For 1 second, in the cracked glass of the old station window, I thought I saw the reflection of a black sedan behind me. I hit the brake and turned. Nothing was there. The mind can do that. It can build shapes out of fear. It can hold a warning so tightly that it starts stamping it onto everything you see. But I no longer believe that means the warning is useless. Sometimes your body notices before your brain does. Sometimes the ordinary world gives off one wrong note, and you talk yourself out of hearing it because you don't want to be dramatic. I have stopped doing that. I still work at the shop. I still take photographs, though my pictures have changed. They are mostly empty roads now, closed businesses, reflections in windows, places where something might have been standing a moment before. Tessa says they make her sad. Maybe they should. True danger often hides inside ordinary scenes. An unlocked door, a silent house, a parked car, a service station no one uses anymore. Survival is not about seeing everything. Nobody can. It is about respecting the small signs when they appear. Watch. Observe. Be careful. The world does not always warn you twice. Story 7. I never expected to end up back near Casper, Wyoming, working an overnight shift at a fuel stop with mountains black against the sky and rain hammering the roof like fists. I had spent most of my 20s trying to stay in places with traffic, neighbors, streetlights, and coffee shops open past 8. I wanted noise. Noise meant witnesses. But my older sister, Rena, called in a favor, and I owed her too many to say no. "It's one night," she said. "Pine Gate Fuel. Easy shift. Mostly truckers. You used to love quiet." "I used to be 10 and stupid," I said. She laughed. I didn't. Storms had been hard for me since our father died. His truck was found against a fallen pine during a September storm when I was 10. People called it an accident, and maybe it was. But all I remembered was my mother standing in the doorway in her robe, listening for an engine that would never come up the driveway. Rain on metal roofs still brings that memory back with cruel precision. The storm rolled in before I reached Pine Gate Fuel. Sheets of rain crossed the windshield. The sign outside the station bent in the wind, its green letters flickering through water. Inside, the place smelled like stale coffee and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The coolers rattled softly, comforting in their ugliness. I called Rena before clocking in. "I'll be fine," I said. "It's just weather." "You sound exactly like Mom when she lied," she replied. I almost smiled. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. I made coffee, checked pump receipts, wiped rainwater from the front mat, and watched the storm turn the parking lot into a silver blur. Midnight came and went. A trucker bought cigarettes. A woman in a minivan used the bathroom and left without making eye contact. Then the road emptied. At 12:46 a.m., I saw him. A tall man pacing near the diesel pumps. No umbrella, no vehicle, just a long figure moving in slow circles through the rain. His coat clung to him. His head was lowered. Every few steps he stopped, turned, and began the same path again. I leaned toward the glass. "Sir?" The rain hit so hard my voice seemed to bounce back at me. He didn't look up. Lightning flashed, and for a fraction of a second I saw his face. Sharp, pale, wet hair stuck across his forehead. His eyes seemed hollow from that distance, but maybe that was the light. Something in my body said, "Do not open the door." I locked it. For another hour, he paced. Sometimes I lost him in the rain. Then he reappeared by pump 2, then pump 4, then near the air machine. The cameras showed static whenever he crossed their view. I told myself the storm was interfering with the feed. That was reasonable. Everything had an explanation if you were willing to settle for one. At 2:03, the doors rattled. Bang, bang, bang. I dropped the coffee mug I had been rinsing. It shattered in the sink. He stood on the other side of the glass, soaked through, one hand pressed to the door. His knuckles were scraped raw. Water ran down his face. "Please," he said, "let me in." My fingers hovered near the phone. "Are you hurt?" "Don't call anyone." The words came fast, sharp, wrong. I stepped back. "Sir, I can call for help." "No." His voice dropped. "No police." The rain filled the silence between us. He stared at me through the glass, as if he could make me unlock the door by wanting it hard enough. Then he turned away and walked into the storm. By morning, I had convinced myself he was drunk, injured, or both. I told the sheriff when he came in for coffee. He listened, checked the cameras, and frowned. The footage showed me at the door, my hand near the lock, speaking to empty Rain. The outside feed had broken into static at the exact moments I said the man was there. Storm does that sometimes, the sheriff said, but he sounded unconvinced. 2 days later, a missing person report came over the local radio. A woman named Elise Ward had vanished from a town 30 miles north during the same storm. Her car had been found near a turnout not far from Pine Gate. There were signs something serious had happened, though the broadcast kept the details careful. That night, the storm returned. I considered calling in sick. I didn't. Pride is a stupid thing, and I had too much of it. I locked the doors after 11, turned on every interior light, and kept Rena on speakerphone while I brewed coffee. "You see anything, you call 911, she said. "I know. No, you don't. You think you have to understand things before reacting. You don't." At 1:38 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not outside. Inside my head, maybe. A slow, wet rhythm that seemed to come from the front of the store. I grabbed the bat from under the counter and looked through the glass. He was there again, pacing. Same soaked coat, same lowered head, same path around the diesel pumps. I called the sheriff immediately. By the time a cruiser arrived, the man was gone. The deputy checked the lot. No footprints stayed visible in the rain. No vehicle. No sign anyone had been there. He asked if I wanted to finish the shift. I said yes because I did not want to admit how badly I wanted to leave. The next night, I stayed in the back office with the door locked and the blinds drawn over the little window. Rain ticked against the roof. The clock moved so slowly it felt broken. At 2:03, a metallic tapping began. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I knew before I looked. He was inside the store. Not by the front door. Not outside the glass. Inside. Standing near the coffee station, dripping water onto the tile. His knuckles were raw. His eyes fixed on mine with terrible emptiness. "Why are you here?" I asked. He didn't answer. He walked past the aisle of motor oil, past the chips, past the freezer, moving with the same slow-pacing rhythm. I held the bat with both hands and backed toward the office phone. "Stay there," I said, voice shaking. He paused by the window, turned his head slightly as if hearing something I couldn't, then went out through the side door into the rain. I called 911. This time I did not care if anyone believed me. 2 days later, search teams found Elise Ward in the woods beyond Route 93. The report said she had been killed. It said a suspect was being sought. It did not mention a man pacing in the rain. It did not mention Pine Gate fuel. It did not mention me, because officially I had seen nothing that cameras could confirm. But I knew what I saw. I started parking under the brightest light. I stopped working storms. Eventually, I transferred to a station closer to town, where the roads had traffic and the rain didn't sound like old memories knocking on the roof. I never saw the man again. Sometimes I think he was Elise's killer. Sometimes I think he was a witness who broke under the weight of what he had done or failed to stop. Sometimes, late at night when rain hits the window in the same rhythm, I wonder if he was something my mind created from fear, grief, and a missing woman's story. But the locked door was real. The scraped knuckles were real. The command not to call anyone was real enough. And that is the part that matters. Fear is not always an overreaction. Sometimes it is your body reading a situation faster than language can. Trust it, especially in storms. Especially when someone asks you to open a door and every part of you says no. Story 8. The wind slipped through the gap in the car door and cut straight through my jacket. I pulled my scarf tighter and tried not to complain. North Dakota in late February looked beautiful in photographs and brutal in person. Online, the plains had seemed wide, clean, almost spiritual. From the passenger seat of Tessa's car, they felt endless in a different way, like the world had been emptied and nobody had remembered to refill it. Tessa hummed along to the radio static, tapping the steering wheel with 2 fingers. She was better at pretending not to be nervous than I was. We had been driving for hours, chasing abandoned barns, wind-bent fences, and old service stations I wanted to photograph for a project I had named Vanishing America because I was 26 and still thought serious titles made art more serious. My brother Owen hated the whole thing. That morning, we had argued over the phone while I packed lenses into my bag. "You don't need to drive across frozen states taking pictures of dead buildings," he said. "I don't need your permission either. You need rent money." That had landed harder than I wanted to admit. Photography was the only thing that ever made me feel honest, but honesty did not pay the electric bill. I spent the first 100 miles of the trip pretending his words hadn't followed me into the car. Near dusk, the gas gauge dipped low. "Next station," Tessa said. "I don't care if it looks like a murder documentary." I looked at the map. There should be something near Ellery Junction. Should be is not my favorite phrase. Snow began to blow sideways across the road. The sky turned the color of dirty cotton. For miles there was nothing but fence posts and fields under a thin sheet of ice. Then a neon sign flickered ahead, weak and intermittent. Larkspur Service. The place looked closed, then open, then closed again each time the sign blinked. The building had peeling white paint and dark windows. The pumps were old, dented, probably dead. But the lot was plowed enough to suggest someone had been there recently. Tessa slowed. "It looks abandoned," I said. "Everything here looks abandoned." She pulled under the sign. The tires crunched over ice. I got out with my camera because fear and curiosity are too often the same impulse in me. The cold hit so hard my eyes watered. I lifted the camera and framed the pump, the dead sign, the long white road behind us. "Make it quick," Tessa called. Then a voice came from the edge of the lot. "Hey!" I lowered the camera. A man stood near the shadow of an old storage shed. Brown coat, bare legs, red athletic shorts that made no sense in that cold. His boots were unlaced, and his hair stuck out from under a knit cap. The absurdity of his clothes should have made him look harmless. It did not. He took one slow step forward. "Hey there," he said again. Tessa got out of the car halfway, leaving her door open. "We should go." I didn't move. My hand tightened around the camera strap. The man stopped about 15 feet away and lifted a flip phone to his mouth. He murmured something I couldn't hear, eyes still on us. Then he tilted his head, studying me like I was the photograph. "Do you need help?" I asked, because apparently I had learned nothing from every warning story ever told. He smiled without warmth. "Help comes when it comes." Tessa said my name in a tone I knew well. I stepped backward. The man snapped the flip phone shut. The sound cracked through the cold. His gaze shifted toward the highway, then back to us. He did not run, did not lunge, did not do anything I could later describe as an attack. But the space around him felt wrong, like a held breath. "We're not alone," Tessa called, voice stronger than I expected. "My husband is right behind us." She was not married. There was no one behind us. The man's eyes flicked past our car toward the road. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. Then he backed away into the shadow beside the shed and was gone. Not disappeared in some supernatural flash. Just gone in the way people can vanish when darkness is thick and your fear is louder than your reason. We got in the car and locked the doors. "Drive," I said. "I'm trying." The engine caught on the second turn. Tessa pulled back onto the highway without checking the map. We drove for 20 minutes before either of us spoke. Snow struck the windshield in white streaks. My camera sat heavy in my lap. "I should have stayed home," I muttered. Tessa kept her eyes forward. "No, you should keep doing your work. You should also stop treating every empty place like it's waiting to become meaningful." I wanted to argue. I couldn't. By the time we found a motel outside Bismarck, my hands had finally stopped shaking, but my mind had not. I kept seeing the red shorts in the neon light, the brown coat, the flip phone, the way he watched us without asking for anything specific, as if the asking itself had not yet begun. I searched online the next morning for Larkspur Service. The most recent review was 6 years old. Closed, someone had written. No gas. Do not stop. Another comment mentioned weird people hanging around, but gave no details. We went back in daylight 2 days later, because I told myself I needed the photograph. Tessa argued, then drove because she knew I would obsess if we didn't. In the sun, the place looked smaller, sadder. The pumps were dry. The windows were boarded from inside. Snow had drifted against the storage shed. There were footprints near the edge of the lot. Large boot prints crossing from the shed toward the pump where I had stood. Then back again. Beside them, in the snow, lay a cracked red plastic button from athletic shorts. Tessa looked at it, then at me. "Take your picture," she said quietly. "Then we leave." I photographed the station for exactly 4 minutes. Every frame felt like evidence, though evidence of what, I still couldn't say. After that trip, my work changed. I still shot abandoned places, but I stopped making them look romantic. I photographed the unease honestly. Open doors, broken locks, tire tracks in snow, the gap behind a building where someone might stand unseen. The images got better, which annoyed me. Fear had improved my eye. Owen saw the series months later and didn't criticize it. He stood in front of one photograph, the old Larkspur sign leaning above a white lot, and said, "This one feels like someone is just outside the frame." I said, "They were." I don't know who the man was. Maybe he was mentally unwell. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he had friends in the dark and Tessa's lie saved us from finding out. Maybe nothing would have happened at all. But fear does not require proof to be useful. Sometimes its job is not to explain. Sometimes its job is to move your feet. I still travel for photographs. I still stop at strange places, though not as carelessly. I share my route. I keep the car running when something feels off. I listen when the person beside me says leave. The world is full of empty spaces. Some are beautiful. Some are dangerous. Some are both. Real courage is not ignoring fear for the sake of the shot. It is knowing when the photograph is not worth what it might cost.